Hello, Overcomers, and welcome to this episode of Connect Ovar Coffee. I'm Runsi, the founder of Ovarcome, and today we are joined by a very special friend and a longtime champion of Ovarcome, Dr. Renee Stubbins. So, Dr. Stubbins is a registered, licensed, and certified oncology dietitian and assistant professor of nutritional sciences and medicine at the Houston Methodist. Renee is a strong advocate for cancer prevention and personalized nutrition therapy before, during, and after treatment. As we all know, that nutrition needs to become cornerstone of not only cancer treatment, but overall health and well-being. So join us for the next 45 minutes to an hour as we chat with Dr. Stubbins about all things oncology nutrition. And if you have any questions as we go along, please type in the comment sections below and we'll try to get it addressed post the discussion. So with that, I have my beverage and let's connect over coffee with Dr. Stubbins. And welcome back, Dr. Stubbins, to this episode. It's been a long while.
It has. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I have many questions because you bring such an important topic to the discussion. But before we get started with all of that, I would like to ask you to kick us off that, is there such a thing as an anti-cancer diet? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be very simple. I personally believe the anti-cancer diet is just a well-balanced diet. They're always looking for the latest and the greatest thing out there, and there's been a lot of interest in like ketogenic in the past couple of years, or the carnivore diet, or the Mediterranean diet. But what it really comes down to, or what I promote, is a very strong, like, plant-based diet. It doesn't mean being full-blown vegetarian or vegan. It's just the research has shown the more fruits and vegetables and plant-based foods we have, like whole grains and lentils, nuts, seeds, people do better. So there's a correlation that does not mean causation. So, and different things work for different people. So that's kind of where the diets emerge, where people kind of find out that they're doing a lot more plant fats and, that then they're starting to see those results that they want. Um, it kind of leads to the evolving diet, the ketogenic diet, the Mediterranean diet. They're all not too far away from each other. They're just, you're kind of alternating the, macronutrients a little bit. But people will sometimes do better with a plan, and that's not a bad thing. I kind of end up telling people the best diet out there, the anti-cancer diet, is a plant-based, pseudo-ketogenic Mediterranean diet. So it's kind of a mashup of all of the above. But what it really comes down to it, as far as what the research shows, if we're going to put like anti-cancer diet on anything, it's just a diet that's high in plant-based foods. Those fruits and vegetables, all those different colors are different antioxidants, and they all protect us in different ways. So it's not like there's one magical fruit or magical vegetable out there. It's the broad spectrum of protection. Our body likes variety. It also likes to buy things that are eat in seasons too, and what's going to give us the most nutrient power is what things are in season for. So it's kind of I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but it's a loaded question just because there's so many layers to it. But if we're going to simplify, it's eat more fruits and vegetables, and that's your anti-cancer diet.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. So this actually brings me to my next question, which is, I've been reading a lot about the increasing push these days from all the health gurus towards a single source food, meaning just an avocado, like in elemental form, right? And as natural as possible and staying away from all kinds of processed food. This is not new, but when there's a call to action on the single source food items, what is your how do you break it down for us? And then also just staying away from processed foods, what would be your guidance on that?
So there, so I have a couple of different thoughts on this. I don't think processed food is necessarily bad. I think, we need to define what processed food is. I will often tell patients, there's also differences between a food and a food product. So food being something that's grown from the earth or harvested from the earth or could be hunted or gathered, that's what we would call food. But sometimes we take that food and we make things and, like a muffin or, that's like a food product.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, I eat processed foods. Now, the processed food can have a very negative connotation to it, but there are some quote unquote healthy processed foods. Like if you look at the ingredients or and a muffin, um, it's flour, eggs, butter, baking soda, baking powder. So that is considered a quote unquote processed food. Now, when we get into really processed food, this is where it gets, questionable is like Twinkies, like Twinkies don't mold. Food should mold. Bread should mold. Muffin should mold. They should, that's the sign that there's not a lot of preservatives in there. Um, Processed foods really became like a food industry staple. It's interesting looking at the food history of America because we wanted to make things shelf stable. So we started adding all these preservatives. And, there's a lot of debate on whether we did more harm than good. When we started adding all of these stabilizers in our food and preservatives in the food and things were moldy, that's where processed foods kind of gets that negative, connotation to it. So it's a balance. I usually kind of you tell people a rule of thumb, if you look at a food product and you're looking at the ingredients and you understand the ingredients and you can okay, I know what most of these things are. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Everything in moderation, right? So it's not like it's bad to have it every now and then. But it's a balance. I personally think it's better to try to eat more food, I should say. It's better if you can make your own mashed potatoes at home, for example, versus buying packaged mashed potatoes, because you're going to have a lot more control over the ingredients. The food industry is there to make money too. So they are going to add extra salt, extra sugar, because that's what makes food taste good. Sugar makes the part of our brain happy, so it gets us going back for more. There's that potato chip ad, you can never just have one. And it's because it constantly drives the part of our brain to seek that reward over and over again because it feels good. It makes us happy. Um, so it gets a little hairy, in that sense. So and also just kind of depends on your lifestyle and what you are able for. If you're a single mom, with three kids, you don't have time to cook a whole meal, right? You have to maybe find sometimes buy that processed food, and it doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean, that you're not giving your family something healthy. It's just finding that balance.
That makes sense perfectly. Thank you. So, you know, in terms of water intake, also, right? It's important maintaining and restoring health. We all know the benefits of water intake, but not only can you tell us about the significance of water, not only in terms of internal hydration, but also, I've been reading about the water therapy, right? Like the sauna, the cold plunges, the hydrotherapy, etc., and their roles in strengthening the immunity and improving the sense of overall well-being. So basically, water as you intake water and also water as a therapy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. As you say that, I'm going to take a sip of water. So water is very important. We are made up 90% of water. Um, Especially if you are going through active treatment. I always encourage my patients to drink a lot of fluids, especially after your infusion. It helps, I'm simplifying things here, but it helps like flush out the leftover chemo. It's like helping your body detox. It's helping get rid of the hangover from the chemo and helps filter out your liver and your kidneys. So that's where that hydration is so, so, so important. But even afterwards, even, if you're not going through infusion, if you're in survivorship or you're interested in prevention, a lot of this problems that people experience is from lack of hydration. So whether it's you have a headache or you just don't feel good, you're probably dehydrated. or if you feel a little bloated or your bowel movements have been a little bit off, you're probably not drinking enough water. That water really is so essential, to our everyday function and how we feel. It's like running on an empty gas tank. So you need that hydration throughout the day. And it's actually good to do a variety of, fluids. So water is important, but mixing up and doing coconut water every now and then, especially if in the summer, if you're running or if you're going through radiation treatment, helping kind of replete those electrolytes naturally. Coconut water is a great source for potassium. And there's a lot of, powdered electrolytes drinks out there. And I like those because you can kind of control the concentration of, it's not too strong or too sweet. And there's actually some a lot of variety of low sugar options. As far as, the cold therapy and, the saunas, there's some ancient wisdom there. So, it's a little bit outside my scope of practice, but I do think it's really important in helping like with your mental health and your well-being. I personally have done the saunas where you go in and then you do a cold plunge. And it is very invigorating, but it's one of those subjective things. It's one of those things that we can't quite put like a scientific data point on. It's also like, when you're having like a bad day and you just walk outside and you get that fresh air and you just feel better just getting outside sometimes and just getting into that sunshine. We can't put a data point on it, but we know we feel better when we do it. So, I think, that's where that sauna and those cold plunges really come and into helping our immune system. It may not be like a direct link, but it might be helping us de-stress. And we know stress is really bad for us. It actually hinders our immune system. So, if that sauna and that cold plunge, helps you, relax, it makes you laugh. There's a whole thing about laughter therapy helping the immune system,
Yeah.
because it helps us de-stress. It helps kind of make us lighter. And when we feel lighter, our immune system isn't going to be so hindered by that internal stress we're having, and our cortisol levels will be. It's just so hard to like scientifically prove that, but as human beings, like we can feel it. So I'm a huge believer in it. I think, it can be definitely part of a healthy lifestyle. And it is invigorating. So I didn't last very long in the cold plunge. I was in and out.
I can imagine. A couple of questions going back to the water. Is there a standard recommendation? Because I've also seen and read articles on the debate on eight glasses of water is not always necessary. Would like your thoughts on that. And also, you mentioned electrolytes, and so as like I also have seen all the powdered and the pouches that they're all in the market these days. And so would you recommend our overcomers or anyone for that matter to be using those on a daily basis to maintain the sodium potassium balance in the body on an everyday basis?
So I think your hydration needs really depends on where you are, kind of if you're in active treatment or if you're in survivor. If you're in active treatment and you're going through infusions or radiation, you need extra fluids. So what that looks like is a little bit different. Like kind of our rule of thumb is 2 liters or about, 64 to 72 ounces a day. But some people need more. Or if you're getting a certain chemo that's kind of, has a high nephrotoxicity, which means high renal toxicity. It's hard on the kidneys, like cisplatin. You're going to need extra water, and they usually give you a whole liter of fluids before even giving you the chemo. So it really kind of depends. I usually tell my patients like start off with, about, eight cups a day. And what really is going to tell you how your hydration is your urine color. If you want a pale yellow, if it starts looking darker or cloudy or has a strong odor, those are signs that you're not consuming enough, water. Or If it's been 5 hours and you haven't had the urge to go to the restroom, then, those are signs that you need water. Or if your skin is dry, or again, if you have the headaches, or kind of a severe case, if you stand up and you're like, whoa, hold on a minute, you're feeling a little dizzy, lightheaded, those are all signs of dehydration. Um, I do think it is important to incorporate electrolytes, whether you are in treatment or not in treatment. You can overwater yourself. So I've had some patients that just really go after it and they really do too good of a job drinking their water, but they end up diluting their electrolytes. So their sodium is too low, or their chloride is too low, their magnesium is too low, their potassium is too low. And usually kind of like you can tell if your electrolytes are off based on like if you're having like little Charlie horses, or you're getting some muscle cramps, muscle spasms, or you just kind of feel a little foggy. Those are kind of all be signs that your electrolytes are a little bit off. So I do think it's important to have, variety is the spice of life. So having something, and there's ways you can make, get those electrolytes naturally. Like I said, coconut water. It's very hard to get magnesium. A lot of electrolyte, traditional drinks like Gatorade, Powerade don't have like a lot of magnesium in it. Other ones can have a little bit more magnesium in it, like Liquid IV, Noon. There's another one, BioLite. I'll have a little bit more punch to them, and because of that, they're not as they can be a little intense, and you're kind of getting used to it. I will say, a lot of my patients get really worried about like the sugar content and the electrolyte powder, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually kind of important that you actually need that sugar, that dextrose to help carry that. From our small intestines to our blood, that dextrose carries that electrolyte across that barrier. So if you're doing sugar-free, electrolyte drinks, it's not going to be as effective, hydrator as if you were to do something with a little bit of sugar in it. Now you can dilute it, you can add some water to it if you're, don't want to do too much sugar at one time. And like I said, with the powders, you have a little bit more control over the concentration. But if we are dehydrated and need that replenishment quickly, you're going to need that sugar in there, especially as we get into the hotter months. You're sweating, you're going to have to replace those electrolytes pretty vigorously, especially if you are in active treatment.
That's great advice. Thank you, Dr. Stubbins. So, moving on to protein, because we know that
Mhm.
that is another very important component of overall health and well-being, especially as you're going through treatment, the protein part. Now, protein comes from plants, animals, and any and all sources, right? That we know that is important. Now, there's a little bit of like recent, like you mentioned, the carnivore diet. I'm going to go back to that for a second because I've been reading a lot about not everyone, but just generally emphasis on the carnivore diet, because it's saying that meat in general, grass-fed animal protein, it could be superior because it provides all the high quality source of essential amino acids, right? But there's also that risk between red meat and cancer incidence. So how should we balance this while meeting our protein needs during or after treatment? And what should our overcomers know about the grass-fed animal protein and the essential amino acids, and the risk and the benefits, and just generally overall your guidance on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so let's unpack it a little bit. So grass-fed beef, in is going to have what we call a higher omega-3 profile.
Mm.
So it's just naturally leaner. Um, so some people actually don't like the taste of it, because we're kind of used to that fattier, corn-fed beef. But cows are meant to eat grass, and the important thing to think about if you are buying or you want to, get a cow that's been grass-fed, it needs to say grass-fed and grass finished.
Mm.
So there's some interesting labeling laws about this. So technically, all cows are grass-fed up until like they're 6 months. And then they are transitioned into corn after that. So it can be a corn-fed cow, but grass, and they can call it grass fed. Now, if it's grass fed and says grass finished, that means they kind of finished their life, eating grass, that they were a cow living on a pasture doing their cow thing, and were never fed corn. So that's what grass fed, grass finished. So that's very important to know when you are purchasing beef, or else you're just paying an extra price for a fancy label. So just be a savvy shopper.
If
If you
I may
go, if
interject 1 second,
Mhm.
if I may interject, when you said grass-fed and grass-finished beef, I'm assuming that it also translates into lamb or bison or any other kind of red meat that we may consider, right?
Correct,
Okay. Thank
correct.
you.
And this is kind of goes into one of the reasons why I really like buying my meat from local farmers.
Mhm.
So if you can know where you're getting your meat from, you can actually get to know their practices. A lot of people ask me, oh, does it need to be organic or can it be conventional? I'm like, actually, just you really need to talk to the farmer because they might have organic practices, but they may not qualify for that USD organic label. It's actually really hard to get. It can be very expensive. So if they're a local mom and pop farm, that's, out near, you know, West Texas, they may not qualify, but they might actually be following those same organic practices and grass-fed and grass-finished beef. And so it's just that's one of the advantages of kind of getting to know your local farms and shopping at a farmer's market. Now, I know at HEB, I have seen grass-fed, grass-finished beef, but again, you just have to really read the label and see if I don't know if I've seen like lamb and bison, but venison is also naturally wild. So if you have hunters in your family or know someone who is deer hunting, venison is a natural wild meat because it's caught out in the wild. So that's another thing to consider. So it is a great source of protein. It's also a great source of iron and B12. So it's important, though, to consider that we maybe only need beef every now and then, maybe once or twice a week. The American Institute of Cancer Research and American Cancer Society recommend us to have no more than 12 to 18 ounces a week of red meat per week. And that includes your beef, your bison, your pork, your lamb, venison. So all of those are considered red meat. But 12 to 18 ounces, I feel like is pretty generous. So if you think about that, 6 ounces, per technically a serving's 3 to 4 ounces. So we're talking about like 3 to 4 servings of, red meat in a week, which is, I think, is pretty reasonable. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. I kind of tend to tell my female patients to go to 12 ounces and my male patients to kind of stick to 18 ounces. So that kind of helps give a guidance. So it's about balance. But red meat, as we get older, it's very common. It is a little bit more inflammatory to our colon. So, and it's the heme iron that makes red meat red and, helps us with our iron and B12 that can be a little hard on our gut to process. So some people can process red meat better than others. So that's another thing to consider. And I will say, if you traditionally have had a hard time processing red meat, you might try the grass-fed and grass-finished beef because it's a little bit leaner. And like I said, it has that higher omega-3 to omega-6 profile. So it's more anti-inflammatory because that's how beef is supposed to be. It doesn't have as much fat in it. So that makes it easier for our colons to digest. So those are just some things to consider when you're adding that to your diet.
So just to unpack, or just to summarize rather, what you said is 18 ounces for males and 12 ounces or for 16 you said, or 12 you said, right? For
12.
women. So which could be spread over, like if we do 4 ounces each, we could have 3 to 4 times a week red meat, and that gives us all kinds of benefits that we're looking for without tipping the scale and the risks for other factors involved. Now, if someone is vegan or plant-based, what is her sources for these particular essential amino acids that the red meat is, yeah, typically? offer?
Yeah. So another really good question. So that really comes down to food pairing. So, you can get like certain plant-based foods are natural complete proteins. So like soy is a natural complete protein. So edamame or soy milk, would be a good source for them. Also combining beans and rice, together, they make a complete protein. Chia seeds, flax seeds, your nuts, all of those are also good sources of protein. So there's different combinations you can do to kind of make up that complete protein. There's also some ancient grains like quinoa and bulgur. Quinoa, I believe, is a complete protein. I may have to double check, but I believe that is considered a complete protein. But there's barley, there's farro, there's freekeh, there's all sorts of ancient grains. And that, would be another way to adequately get that protein into your diet. And there is a way to do an egg substitute with chia seeds. I can't recall it, but they call it a chia egg. So if you're baking or if you want to incorporate, you don't want to eat eggs, but you want to have the benefits of that egg, um, nutrients, you can make a quote unquote chia egg.
Okay, thank you. Next I'm going to talk about or ask you about supplements, right? So these days the whole market is flooded with supplements for each and everything that you can think of. And then, we know that especially for our overcomers while they're on treatment or even in a remission phase, as much as vitamins and mineral supplements are important, but there could also be a possible interference with the cancer treatment, right? So, tell us a little more about that, and also which ones of the supplements and the vitamins would you recommend that our overcomers consider, and why?
Yeah, that's a, you know, a really important topic. So I think all women over the age of 40 should be taking a vitamin D and a calcium supplement. It's just natural. We naturally don't go outside as much as we, used to because we're going to want to be, protective of our skin. So vitamin D, having your vitamin D level checked, some people might need a prescription dose, but vitamin D supplementation is so important. Vitamin D actually has a lot of cancer prevention properties. So making sure you have an adequate level in your bloodstream is really important. Calcium is really important for our bones. So that is a good supplement as well. During active treatment, I'm actually a pretty big fan of some of my patients. It just depends. If you have a pretty well balanced diet, you don't necessarily need a multivitamin. But if I have some patients that are really struggling and we're kind of eating a little sporadically, not necessarily a balanced diet just because we're dealing with a lot of side effects, I think, or we're having a lot of fatigue, I think a prenatal vitamin is actually really helpful. I'm a big fan of Nature Made because it's just, quote unquote, normal amounts of the vitamins. It's not to the extreme. It surprises a lot of my patients when I tell them I don't want them to take high doses of vitamin C. Vitamin C is a strong antioxidant, and a lot of the ways the chemo works, any of the platinum drugs, so if you're getting carboplatin, which is very commonly given to ovarian cancer patients, carboplatin is what we call an alkylating agent, and vitamin C can interact with alkylating agents. Vitamin C also can hinder radiation. So we don't want high doses of vitamin C. Now, you can get vitamin C naturally, like if you have a glass of orange juice or some berries, totally okay, because your body's going to process that in a natural, controlled way. Versus if you're taking that shot of emergency in the morning to help your immune system, it's going to hit it all at once. And we just don't know if it's safe. So it's just the unknown that really, makes us nervous. So we rather go on the side of caution and get vitamin C naturally. Um, I'm also, now if you're post-treatment, not on any active treatment, I'm a big fan of omega-3s. I think omega-3 can be very beneficial and helps kind of establish a healthy fat profile in our diet. I eat pretty good, but I naturally have high cholesterol because of my family genetics. And so my triglycerides just naturally run high, and I'm, basically a pseudo vegetarian. But omega-3 can help to lower my triglycerides. So it really helps kind of put your body back in it's just a helper. So, I eat salmon, I eat flax seeds, I eat chia seeds, all these great sources. And so that helps it. But sometimes you need that little extra oomph. So an omega-3 fatty acid fish oil pill is something to consider if you're in survivorship. I say survivorship because sometimes doctors don't like it to be taken during treatment because it does have some antioxidant properties. So similar to the vitamin C situation. Um, Other supplements I'm really, really wary on. I tell my patients, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. The thing about supplements, they're not regulated by the FDA. So they literally could be putting sawdust in a pill and selling it to us and charging $200 for that bottle, and there's no quality check. I have had, and it really gets me fired up because I've had patients put a lot of money into these, supplements that have no evidence behind them, and they're taking advantage of your vulnerability, and it's scary being diagnosed with cancer, and so we all search, we all go down the dark rabbit hole. Um, and sometimes it can sound really convincing, those reviews in the papers, but those are often paid. And now we live in a world of AI, and so we have these algorithms. So usually our social media, so there's marketed, generated, just to like slam it in your face, and it just sounds so good, and you're seeing it over and over again. And the Amazon reviews look really good, so it sounds convincing. But just know if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And, I usually tell my patients, this is kind of a dark way to think about it, but there is a huge pharmaceutical industry in the United States, and they have hundreds of thousands of scientists looking for the next big thing to break through to cure cancer. So if it really was that $30 supplement that, is that mushroom extract from lion's mane or turkey tail mushroom extract, if it really was that simple, they would have already have it marketed. They would already be making it into a drug. They would already have it patented and be charging us, millions of dollars for it. So that's kind of a morbid way, but we do live in a capitalist nation. That's one of the reasons why it drives that competition to find that next best thing. But just be really, really careful with supplements, especially the herbal supplements. They can do more harm than good. I've had more patients than I can count have to stop treatment due to liver toxicity caused by supplements. So it's a real thing. I've had patients defer treatment because they want to pursue these healthy alternatives that sound so promising, but they're really scary. And they really can do more harm than good. I believe in complementary medicine. I do think that there's a happy place to where you could do traditional chemotherapy and treatment and have an open, honest conversation with your doctor. If you are interested in a supplement and you do think you do want to take it, then talk to the doctor and the healthcare team or the dietitian about it. Because I've had patients do that. They're like, I really do feel better. I'm like, okay, let's try it and let's just monitor. But I need you to let me know if you're taking it so I can keep an eye on it, on things. So, but I do want my patients to advocate for themselves. So it's just really keeping that communication open and being that savvy consumer, and knowing that the supplement business is there to make is a business. It's there to make money.
Thank you so much for being so candid about this. It is very important that you bring about the points, because like you said, the entire supplement industry, whether it be protein powders or pills or whatever it may be, there is so much feel-good story behind it that it's hard to discern which ones are the actual ones to take. I mean, and which ones are not, because you can fill up your whole pantry with the supplement bottles in a second if you listen to all that storytelling. So then just going back to the supplements for 1 second. So basically what you're suggesting is vitamin D is important, omega-3 when you're in remission or survivorship, to talk to your physician about and look at and explore the possibility. Vitamin C, utilize or don't utilize during treatment, and utilize with caution because it has some sort of interference with the drug regimen that you may be on. And then just in general, everything else, just be cautious. Talk to your physician before you embark upon any supplementation routines that you do not know about what the interactions could be. Now, what is your thought on probiotics?
So I think probiotics can be very helpful, especially if you've taken antibiotics in the last year. I think a probiotic supplement alongside probiotic food, so such as yogurt or kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. Those are all natural sources of probiotics. So it's good to get them for both, and, it's also good to have prebiotics in your diet. So prebiotics, if you kind of remember the old video game Pac-Man. So Pac-Man is the probiotic and your prebiotic is, and it kind of just eats it up. And that's what creates that healthy gut microbiome. So your prebiotics is your fiber. So that's where that fruits and the vegetables, that roughage comes in. So that kind of feeds that probiotic in your gut and helps create that natural healthy gut microbiome. Probiotic supplements, again, it's always good to talk to your doctor about it, but most of them are generally safe. Couple of there's a couple of different brands I really like. I like Align, I like Floristore. It's important to look at the strains of the probiotics. So different strains can help with different issues you're having. So there's some specific strains that help with like female health versus, there's some specific strains that help with more gut health. So that's really kind of where you need to kind of pick and choose.
Thank you. And so the seed oil debate. There's so much on seed oils these days that I'm reading. And so, again, this is hard for people who are not medically inclined, or we believe in evidence-based nutrition, right? So, in my entire life, I have believed that, avocado oil and olive oil are the good ones. But what is this debate on seed oil, and what is your thought on using seed oil in our cooking or otherwise everyday life, and especially when it comes to our overcomers undergoing cancer treatment?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what you're going to be using the oil for. So, probably early 2000s, forget the name of it, Rachel, I don't remember her name, but she
Rachel
made
Ray?
Rachel Ray, yes. She made olive oil very popular. So people were using it everywhere, but olive oil is what we call finishing oil. So we're really not supposed to cook with it, because it has what we call a low smoke point.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means, if you like, saute and it's, really hot, almost frying in a way, it's too hot and it actually causes the oil to change and oxidize. So now it went from being a healthy oil to not so healthy oil, because now you change those fats into more inflammatory fats
Yeah.
by just heating them up too much, So, um, olive oil should be used to like finish. So if you did a dry roast on vegetables and then you tossed it in olive oil afterwards. Or if you made a pasta dish and you were going to season it afterwards, you would toss it with olive oil, or a salad dressing, you toss it with olive oil. You can use olive oil in baking, but it's pretty unusual. Avocado oil has a high smoke point. So if you want to like saute things, like I like to kind of brown some chicken before I put it in the oven, I'll use an olive oil. I'm sorry, an avocado oil, and use that to that has a higher smoke point. I think it's like 450. So I'm not going to fry in it. It's just a saute. Or if I'm going to roast vegetables, I'll usually roast them in avocado oil. Now, if you are going to decide to, you want to, fried chicken the old-fashioned way, then using something like canola oil or even lard or shortening, those are going to have a higher smoke points. Same thing with butter. So if you are making like a steak, and you want to do it on a stovetop using butter, creates a nice, that's going to be kind of that best way to use it. So that's really where the different. So different oils can be used for different things, and it really comes down to the smoke point, and how you're best to use that oil. So they're all avocado oil and olive oil are going to be a quote unquote healthier oil profile. So they just have a little bit more, overall higher in those mono and polyunsaturated fats are more anti-inflammatory versus the canola oil is just going to be okay. It's not going to be as functional. It's not bad. It's going to be healthier than butter. Kind of another thing to keep in mind is if you want to know if it's going to be high in saturated fat or unsaturated fat, if it's solid at room temperature, it's high in saturated fats. If it's liquid at room temperature, it's higher in unsaturated fats. So you could think S for solid for saturated. So butter, it comes from cows, so it's going to be an animal source, so it's going to be higher in that saturated fat. Lard comes from animals, so it's higher in saturated fat. Same thing with shortening. So, but that's hydrogenated oil, which is a whole nother story, but definitely not good for us. That goes back to that food stability. So hydrogenated oil it doesn't go rancid as bad as other oils.
So basically, so just one question, follow-up question on that. So if we were to um, use it for baking, for example, olive oil, right? So is 400 too much, too high a temperature with olive oil, or what is the temperature that optimal for to use for olive oil if you use for cooking or
I think
baking?
if it's under 400, it should be okay.
Okay.
There's an old going slow and low, with olive oil is kind of the way to go. Now, if you're going to use, it would be if it's going to be a higher one. I really do, I think the smoke point though might be lower. It might be 350. I may have to get back to you on the smoke point of olive oil. But I'll be honest, I haven't used it in cooking. I usually tend to use my canola oil or avocado oil, because olive oil is going to have a very distinct flavor to it. So I very rarely do I use it in my baking, where canola oil is a little bit bland, or even avocado oil. So it's not going to mess with the flavor. Um, Olive oil might be 350 smoke point. I might need to go double
Yeah,
check
that's
that,
fine.
but
I like what you said, low and slow. So that's what I'm going to remember when it comes to
yeah.
olive oil. Um, so in terms of, I know that there is no right or wrong answer to it, but from your years of practice and experience, do you feel like optimizing nutrition could prevent or even delay the cancer recurrence? What are your thoughts?
Short answer is yes. So,
That's a great answer. We love it.
yeah, there was a study, I want to say maybe in 2013 by the American Institute of Cancer Research, where they said almost one third of cancers could be prevented by changing our lifestyle. So lifestyle including your diet, but also including, your alcohol intake, your stress, your sleep, your exercise, but that's a pretty significant number. Only like 5 to 10% cancers are caused by genetics. So in most cancer, it affects us as we get older. And cancer happens when basically a cell makes a mistake. So when we are faced with several stressors in our life. There's environmental stressors, but then there's life stressors. So stress is just not good for our body. So when we have that happen, that's when mistakes happen.
Mhm.
So if you have these things that kind of help keep that stress at bay or give your body better tools to handle it, such as a healthy diet, such as, getting enough sleep, such as having kind of a good mental space in your head, um, it makes a difference. There's again a lot of correlation studies. They haven't quite figured out what's the best diet, kind of going back to what we started off with. They just have seen these patterns that people who eat more fruits and vegetables, are active, that drink very minimum alcohol, that don't smoke, that have good, work-life balance, stress-free lives, do better. There was a Netflix series, and I read the book a long time ago called The Blue Zone. So
I
it's
have watched
about, have
it.
you heard of
Yes.
it?
I have watched
Yeah.
the whole series. Yes.
Yeah, but it's fascinating if you
Yes.
look at it. You have these centenarians, that these people who live to 100 years old, but there's like a clear pattern between all of them is an active, happy lifestyle. Again, we talked about kind of the softer stuff and the subjective stuff, that things that can't always be measured by science, but we just know it's good for us. So that's where I really think it's just that overall healthy lifestyle. Diet is part of it, but it's not all of it. When I talk to my survivors, I'm like, look, I can help you with the diet part for sure, but you got to do the work. You got to help yourself out in other areas and really take a look at seeing what is causing these extra stress in your life. And, we may have to adjust things, but my favorite was the older ladies in Japan having tea together. And I was
Yes.
like that. I could totally be down for that. I said to my girlfriend, I'm like, this is our future. This is where we're gonna go retire.
Yes.
I could do that.
Love that. I watched that too. It was amazing. I watched all episodes of
Yeah.
that series. It was amazing. You're absolutely right. So, talking about overall health, I know this is not, exactly directly related to diet, but sleep and rest and their powers, right? So, can you tell us more about the role of sleep and rest in building and strengthening immunity, speeding up recovery, and their restorative powers, basically? And so, what would be a recommendation to our overcomers in terms of sleeps, naps, rest while in treatment or even out of treatment?
Yeah. I don't know, Renzi, if you've ever known this about me, but my favorite animal, my spirit animal, is a sloth. So I'm a big fan of the sloth. So taking things nice and slow and sleeping a lot. Sleep is our recovery mode, and I tell my patients that that is your body's way of saying, whoa, slow down. When you get that fatigue spell and you're going through treatment and all of a sudden it just hits you, just go with it. Take that power nap. There's been studies showing like just a 15-minute nap can completely recharge you. And I'm a strong believer in that, especially now that I have a toddler. If I have 15 minutes to close my eyes, I could feel like a new woman afterwards. But just that 15 minutes just to sit down, slow down, it can make a big difference. So getting putting yourself in a good routine for nighttime is so essential. Minimizing screen time 1 to 2 hours before bed, reading an old-fashioned book, or doing something that does not involve a screen is really, really important. Listening to music, going out for a walk, an evening stroll makes a big difference. I'm a big believer in reading like a book, or now they have, I think, the Kindles that have like the low light, so it, does look more like a paper. But kind of setting yourself up for success, to have that restful sleep. Um, it's it's essential because again, you need that deep REM sleep to help your body recharge, and it really makes a big difference in your immune system and how you're going to respond, because that recovery mode helps your body go into like kind of like an eco mode. It kind of puts it, when you're running around all day, think about all the things that your body is doing for your brain's running, your heart's running, you're walking, your digestive is going. But when you sleep, nothing else is happening, right? So when nothing else is happening, your body can just focus on what it needs to repair. So if you're in treatment, then your body's repairing your cells, it's building those new healthy cells that back up, we got rid of the cancer cells during the day. Now we're in that recovery mode. We're building up those new healthy cells. We're building up our immune cells. We're building up our red blood cells, our platelets, all that good stuff. It kind of just, shuts everything down and hones in on what needs to be repaired, but you have to give it that opportunity. So that's why it's important to get into that good routine. I'm a big believer in, 8-hour sleeps. Um, and if you can't, that's okay. You need to take a nap during the day, then let yourself take a nap. Give yourself that 15-minute, just close your eyes, see what happens. And just rest. don't fight it, especially if you're during treatment. I tell my patients, don't power through. Don't be like, oh, let me go get another cup of coffee. Let me go grab a Red Bull. Please don't grab a Red Bull. They're terrible. Caffeine drinks are terrible for you. Just do green tea if you have to, or coffee. But just let it happen. It's okay it's your body's way of saying slow down. Is when we hit that fatigue wall, it's your body's way of saying, okay, you're going too fast. You're going to burn out. Slow down.
Thank you. And it's so important that we talk about, you said that, back to the basics, but it's so important that we talk about the basics,
Hmm.
because they truly are the fundamental pillars of health. And we just kind of tend to ignore them and go straight to medicine. But there's so much out there that's for easy grasp and free around us
Hmm.
that we can do that overall builds our immune system, our health and well-being. So on that note, you also mentioned sunlight. So I know that sunlight exposure is also very important for your overall, immunity boosting and mental health and all of those things. But there's also that risk factor of skin cancer and sun
Hmm.
exposure, and wear your sunscreen, don't go out. But I have also heard so many gurus talking about or swearing by sunlight and how it improves your overall health and well-being. So tell us about the balance and what to seek and where to stop, and when it comes to sunlight and health.
Yeah, I love sunshine. That's why I'm so
I do
happy to live in
too.
Texas. During those couple of weeks where we had no sunshine, I could definitely tell it affected my mood, because I'm just used to it. And they've actually done pretty significant studies to show people who live in the Northwest that don't get as much sunshine, as we do here in the South. It can definitely affect your well-being, especially if you're not used to it. Um, so finding that balance, yes, I do think it's very important to protect yourself from the sun. So wearing a big hat, putting on your sunscreen, it's going to help age you flawlessly, So sun protection is my dermatologist's number one role, and I wholeheartedly believe that. So protecting yourself from the sun. So and that's you're still going to get the benefits by doing that. So if you're wearing that big sun hat, you're wearing your sunscreen, but you're outside, you're getting that indirect sunshine exposure. You're still getting that vitamin D. Sunlight reflects off all the surfaces. So, that's why it's still important to wear the protection, even on a cloudy day. So those UV rays are still penetrating, but you're still getting that vitamin D, and you're also getting that warmth from the sun too. So it doesn't take away, all the happy things that come with sunshine. You're just, being cautious and protecting yourself, from, skin damage essentially from the UV rays. So there's a way to do that and still get the benefits from the sunshine.
And I also feel, I'll just add to that, that typically, I mean, of course, we always don't have that, that flexibility, but certain times when I want to go out and seek 15, 20 minutes of sunshine, I'll quickly go to my weather app and see what the UV is saying, in terms of, when it says it's low to moderate, it's fantastic to just go out and soak all that sunshine, um,
Yeah.
feel good about it. And also, the difference between the infrared and the UV, right? The
Hmm.
infrared is the one that we need to soak as much as possible. So understanding sunlight properly and not just say avoid the sun because it is going to cause skin cancer. I think we need to redefine that language a little bit, because to your point, sunshine is critically important for overall health and well-being. So I invite our overcomers to read a little more into the benefits of sunlight. So I know we are almost, I cannot believe we are at the top of the hour. I have so many other questions to ask you, but very quickly, I cannot leave out the exercise part of it. Just very briefly, what would be your recommendation to our overcomers in terms of mild to moderate exercise and its benefits while going through treatment?
Yeah, exercise again, super important. I mean, we forget we're humans, but we're also mammals. We're meant to be in motion. I always kind of tell my patient a body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. So, and it's okay. You don't need to have the mindset, well, I'm not gonna be able to get a full workout in, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
just, something is better than nothing is another, kind of mantra I tell my patients, even if it's just going out for a quick walk. Another thing that I encourage is doing early morning walks or late evening walks when you do have that sunshine kind of at a lower angle. So you still get those benefits,
Yes.
but it's not at its peak. So going out for that walk is great. Walking is probably the easiest and the best exercise to do for our bodies, especially if you're going through treatment. It uses all of your muscles. And gravity is helping things push down. So, helps with our GI tract and our digestion. You're using all of your limbs, your smooth muscles and your lean muscles. And it's keeping your body in motion. So going back to the blue zones, they talked about how much they walk, and how active they are. So you want to maintain that level of activity. And even if it's just down a block, even if it's just to go check the mail, that's okay. The exercise is such an important aspect of it. I tell my patients, even on active treatment, 30 minutes is the goal. It doesn't, I mean, it can be in 5-minute intervals, it can be in 10-minute intervals, but, having that 30 minutes really makes a difference, especially in the long run, especially if you're preparing for surgery. That's a whole other topic, but, that exercise and building up your respiratory fitness by walking can help you recovery from surgery quicker too. So there's a whole it's all connected. So, but that, body emotion to stay in motion, and we're meant to be in motion.
Thank you. You have given us a lot of nice one-liners that I'm going to remember. Thank you. And so I know that we are at the top of the hour right now, but I know I have missed asking questions that were on my list. But is there anything big and bold that I've missed asking you that you would like to share?
I think we covered so much information. I think you did such a good job kind of framing everything. I can't think of anything else. I'm always happy to answer any questions if anyone has questions afterwards. But I think we've covered a lot of great information. Definitely
Okay.
hit the key points.
Okay, thank you. And so my last question, I asked this, and you know this because you've been to our sessions before, that, in just closing, what message of overcoming would you like to share with our overcomers listening today?
I would say eat your fruits and vegetables and stay active and get lots of rest and sleep.
And sunlight, may I
And
add.
sunlight, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Stubbins. This was amazing. Thank you for your time and sharing all this valuable knowledge and information with our overcomers and listeners today. And overcomers, hope this was beneficial for you. I could have gone on with Dr. Stubbins for the next 5 hours because she's just a wealth of information. So I request you to share this video far and wide with anyone you think may benefit from all the pearls of wisdom and the insights Dr. Stubbins shared with us today. And we will be back with the next episode of Connect Over Coffee very soon. Until then, you keep overcoming. Thank you and bye.